Why do we have to study logarithms? Will they help us with stockbroking? Surely not. Why suddenly create the x and then force us to find it? And why do I have to prove that it's an isosceles triangle? I see clearly that it is. Duh! Then I received the note back saying, "What are you two talking about?" I just figured that another kid had intercepted it. So with my eyes still glued to my level 3692 of Candy Crush, I scrawled back, "Keep your nose out of my business," and then handed the paper over without looking. Ahem. But your business is taking place in my class. I slowly looked up and saw that it was my teacher. Oh, dang. Busted again. Looking over, I saw Brett with his big guilty face. Ugh, he should have been more careful. Okay, you. And you. Out. You're probably wondering how I'm such a pro at this pose. Well, it's because I've done it 1,000 times. And that serious woman over there is Mrs. Megan, my math teacher. I swear, she totally has it in for me. Okay, let me tell you the story. Once upon a time, there was a girl who, due to an unexpected accident with a trash can and an ill-placed skateboard, ended up arriving a teensy bit late for her exam. But the teacher refused to let her in, and also failed her. Grrr. Yeah, that girl was me, Lexi. Thus, from that moment forth, she became my arch enemy. So, during her boring lecture, I threw a paper plane at the board and said, "Miss, you've spelled arithmetic wrong. I suppose spelling is a bit hard for a numbers person like you. It's okay." Clearly my comment got to her, as during that same class, she picked on me to graph a function. Easy peasy. So I created a masterpiece that made her eyes roll, and the whole class found it hilarious. And as expected, she gave me a lengthy lecture on my childish behavior, and even threatened to call my parents. Poof! Yeah, good luck with that, as unless it involved business, then my parents were practically impossible to reach. Besides, I was just having a laugh. Mrs. Megan needed to lighten up. So I secretly stuck a piece of paper saying "free hugs" on her back. I lurked behind a tree and watched as all these people surrounded her. She looked so bewildered as she tried to navigate past them while having no idea what was going on. The good old days. Suddenly, Brett patted my shoulder and told me 30 minutes had passed and we needed to go back to class. My butt hadn't even touched my chair when I heard a patronizing voice say, "You shouldn't act like that." Ugh, that's Faye, the teacher's pet and a real pick-me girl. Every time the teacher asks a question, she wriggles her arm in the air and squeaks out, "Me! Me! Me!" Mrs. Megan only likes her because she always laughs at her boring jokes. Oh well, I may have no proof, but in my experience, Faye's definitely not as innocent as she looks. Don't say I'm jealous, 'cause I'm 100% not. You probably think I hate school, but it's still way better than my so-called home. Ugh. At least school could be amusing, while my home life consisted of mom and dad locked away in their office 24/7. I can't remember the last time either of them cooked dinner. So takeaway it is. So I'm texting Ben, my super sexy BF. He's been studying in France, and he's back today. I've missed him so much, but unfortunately, I couldn't pick him up from the airport because of, school. And tonight, he has a family party, but we're meeting up tomorrow. Yay! Let me see your face, sweetie. I miss you. You know what? Today, that teacher gave me detention again. Really? She messed with the wrong one, didn't she? Definitely. I will retaliate tomorrow. She'd better watch out. Okay, but don't end up in after-school detention, as I want to see you. My mom's also a teacher, but she's not that much. Oh, by the way, she's here. You want to say hello? Yeah, sure. Ben, it gets on my nerves whenever I think of that Before I had a chance to finish my words, a person popped up on the screen. Mrs. Megan! Lexi? OMG! We both gave each other stunned, open-mouthed stares. It looked like the screen had frozen. Literally. Then just when I didn't think it could get any worse, suddenly a familiar voice broke the silence. Oh, Ben has a girlfriend? Let me see her. Huh? That's Faye! Oh, my days, this is too much to process. My two enemies were in the same frame. Shocked, I ended the call. Right after, I received a text from Ben saying, "Don't worry, my mother may look super serious, but she's kind. And the girl is Faye, my neighbor. We've known each other since childhood, and she's cool." This was so crazy. Now I'd have to face them both every day, knowing that they are associated with my BF. Oh, the future is as dark as night. And yeah, this is the beginning of the series thusly entitled Living with My Future Mother-in-Law and My BF's Annoying Female Best Friend. And since then, things at school turned weird. For our class Halloween event, which had a Toy Story theme, Mrs. Megan was in charge of handing out the parts. Faye was Bo Peep, and she had this really cute outfit. While me, I was stuck as Mrs. Potato Head. My outfit was so lame, and one of my googly eyes kept on falling off. Ugh! It was so embarrassing, but I couldn't say anything. I couldn't mess with her anymore, as I still wanted to be with her son. Ugh. Worse still, math class became an endurance test. I was so sick of being compared to that goody two-shoes Faye. Lexi, if you spent more time studying and less time painting your nails, you'd be a top student like Faye. Poof! Faye caught on to what was going on and also started playing tricks on me. One time in class, when I was dozing and Mrs. Megan was correcting the homework, I overheard, "This symbol shows that A is not equal to B." Faye then turned around and whispered, "Just like you, you're not equal to me. And you don't deserve my Ben either." What? Ben is mine, not hers. I bared my teeth and was about to say something when that brat started pretending to cry, saying that I was picking on her. Out! Mrs. Megan came to us with burning eyes. We were walking out when in a sympathetic tone she added, "Faye, you stay." I returned to my meditating pose, but I couldn't shake off my anger. How unfair! Later, when it was lunchtime, Faye walked over to me with a cup of Coke, saying it was a peace offering, and that she was sorry for earlier. This was confusing, but whatever. I took it and was about to take a sip when Brett rushed over waving his arms about. "Lexi, stop!" I saw Faye put soy sauce in it. I was just a second away from yelling at her when Mrs. Megan appeared. I smiled smugly, thinking Faye would finally get into trouble. But to my surprise, Mrs. Megan took a sip of the drink and tried to keep a neutral face as she replied, "There's nothing wrong with it." Really? They went that far to cover up for each other? Whatever. I had a date with Ben tonight to prepare for anyway. That night as planned, I arrived at Ben's house with a somewhat wilting pot plant for Mrs. Megan. I was kinda excited to finally have a cooked meal. Only, when I walked into the kitchen, I couldn't smell anything cooking. Mrs. Megan appeared and rubbing her hand said, "Lexi, you don't mind cooking, do you? It's just been a long week of drawing diagrams. My hand kinda aches." Seeing the situation, Ben immediately came to help, but she reminded him that he'd agreed to fix a pipe or something. To be honest, I'd never touched a frying pan before. But I mean, how hard could it be? I'd make pancakes, though it's not really suitable for dinner, but I'd seen them on a 5-minute crafts and they were clearly a breeze to make. Only, it didn't go to plan. In situations like this, it's important not to panic. But, yeah, I panicked. I needed a plan B. Quick! In a rush, I threw away all the evidence of the failed pancakes and ordered food online. After all, Thanks to my workaholic parents, this was my forte. I instructed the delivery person to come to the back door, so Ben and Mrs. Megan would be none the wiser. Expectedly, at the very first bite, Ben and my mother-in-law praised me profusely for my food, and Ben even joked that I should join the next season of Master Chef. Yo, I will rate this restaurant 5 stars for sure. Mrs. Megan suddenly dropped her spoon, so I quickly bent down to pick it up, only she leaned down and whispered sarcastically, "I order from Sydney's too. Their sauces are divine." Oh, busted! Then, halfway through the night, this man showed up and apologized for being late. Turns out he was Jim, Faye's father, but Faye wasn't coming over as she was out with friends. Happy days! I watched Mrs. Megan and him touch a tissue box at the same time by mistake, and then blushed? Huh? Oh, I get it. She liked him. Now it made sense why she was always sucking up to Faye. Have you thought about remarrying? I asked Jim innocently. To the waiting eyes of me, as well as Mrs. Megan, he hesitantly answered, I don't think Faye would like that. Mrs. Megan glumly stared down at the floor. Okay, so I actually felt kinda sorry for her. Besides, matchmaking has always been my hobby, so I decided to help her. I knew that Faye was at a party on Saturday night, so I decided this was the perfect opportunity to play Cupid. I told Mrs. Megan that Jim had something to tell her, so meet him at the Golden Reef restaurant at 7 p.m. Then I told Jim the same. I stood behind a column and watched them share their starter, and then give each other gooey-eyed glances. Then Jim reached out and took Mrs. Megan's hand. They were looking at each other passionately when Faye suddenly rushed in from nowhere and angrily slammed her bag on the table. So this is it? My teacher? And my dad? For real?
Faye, why are you here?
Jim stuttered. No one can ever replace Mom! Then she turned to a dumbfounded-looking Mrs. Megan. Turns out you were only being nice to me to get my dad. You're fake. Stay away from us. Mrs. Megan covered her face with her hands, then quickly left. Geez, Faye was brutal. And however annoying Mrs. Megan was, she didn't deserve that. You! Faye shouted. Uh-oh, her gaze fixed on me. It figures you'd be behind this. Keep your big nose out of our family business and start caring about yours instead. Guess this is what lack of parental care does to a kid. I stared at her speechless. Those words should have driven me mad, but for some reason, I only felt sad. And so guilty. I really just meant well. So, first thing at school the next day, I swallowed my pride and went to Mrs. Megan's classroom, where she looked lost in thought as she marked homework. I coughed to clear my throat, then said, Miss, I'm sorry. I honestly was trying to help, but now I realize I should have minded my own business. I'm also sorry for being a jerk in your class. She was silent at first, then replied, It's okay, as I've come to realize that you and I aren't so different. We both have complications in the way of finding love. Guess it's really not easy to get approval from your parents' family, huh? She smiled and gently stroked my hair before continuing. You're such a smart and kind girl, and I always knew you could do better in class, that I must have been too harsh on you. I'm sorry, too. I smiled back at her, and at that moment, I felt like all of our previous conflicts melted away. And I realized that I shouldn't neglect my studies. Instead, I should work hard to become the best version of myself. So, with a lot of hard work, I went from trailing at the bottom of the class to reaching the top spot, even overtaking Faye. Ha! Speaking of Faye, she was still ignoring both me and Mrs. Megan, and never put her hand up in class anymore. But then a rainbow flame experience in the chem lab changed things. Everyone ran out of there when the curtain caught on fire, except for a terrified Faye. Luckily, Mrs. Megan rushed inside to rescue her just in time, and covered her with a jacket as she led her to safety. After that, Faye realized that Mrs. Megan is a good person, who cares about both her and Jim. So, through blurry eyes, Faye sobbed out, "Thank you so much, and sorry, I was too childish. Please forgive me." A few months later. So, yeah, you see, my wing woman plan worked. And now I have a second family. A really big one. But you know what's the best thing? That is, I no longer have to order food online anymore. 'Cause I will stick to here, and my mother-in-law will cook for me.